Hey guys, welcome to my Keion deck profile. Apologies in advance, I am terrible with thinking up words on the fly for videos outside of maybe Let's Plays. So I am going to be scripting this to try prevent fumbling my words. Also, the majority of the deck is predominantly proxies and don't look too good. Now I have done multiple videos showing these custom cards. If you haven't seen the main 4 where I go over the cards as a group and show where it all started, I'll link them down below. I have been using Dueling Books solo mode to deck test and try to work out what cards to include, what ratios to use, and make any necessary changes to each card. If you guys would like to see test hands, even though that's more Dark Armed Duelists thing, comments down below. So let's get into the deck profile. To start, I'm running 3 Keion Nautica Mana Bay. Her effects are, if this card is summoned, you can add 1 level 4 or lower Keion monster, except Keion Nautica Mana Bay, from your deck to your hand, and if you do, you can normal summon 1 Keion monster. If this card is in your graveyard and you do not control a face-up Keion Nautica Mana Bay, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use each effect of Keion Nautica Mana Bay once per turn. Nautica is the main starter of the deck, basically acting as a Stratos, but also allowing a summon if you successfully search. She's not quite as good as Stratos, since she can't search herself and only has the low-level Keions as targets. But I feel it's still a good effect, as I believe other searches have similar restrictions. The second effect is shared among multiple main deck Keions, and will be called the Revival effect to save some time. Next are 3 Keion Now Okuda. Her effect is, when this card is normal summoned, you can target 1 level 4 or lower Keion monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but destroy it during the end phase. Now's mainly a comeback card, but can also be a combo extender with the right hand, and being a tuner allows various synchro plays. For the 2 of Keions, I'm running 2 Link Aussa Nakano. Her effects are, you can remove 1 music counter from your field, special summon 1 cat token, beast type earth level 1 attack 100 defense 100, plus the revival effect. Tokens have gotten substantially more important as time has gone on, being excellent materials for synchros and links, and with the field spell effect, Aussa becomes quite a bit better. Next are 2 Keion Tsumugi Kotobuki. Her effects are, once per turn, you can remove 1 music counter from your field, target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, destroy it. This card cannot attack the turn this effect is activated, plus the revival effect. That first effect is kind of a joking reference to Mugi's absurd strength in Keion, especially in the college manga where she basically feather taps Akira, yet sends her flying into the wall. She is a weaker Blue Eyes alternative, not having a special summon effect and only hitting face-up monsters, but giving those to a level 4 would kinda break it. Next are 2 Keion Yui Hirasawa. Her effects are, you can remove 1 music counter from your field. You can normal summon 1 Keion monster in addition to your normal summon or set. You can only gain this effect once per turn, plus the revival effect. Since so few of the main deck Keions have any kind of special summon effect, having a way to normal summon multiple times is sorta needed, especially since Ultimate Offering is never coming back. I wasn't too sure if I should put some kind of summon restriction, like you cannot special summon any monsters except Earth monsters, or something like that. I may change the cards to do that if people say it's necessary, but for now, it's staying the way it is. Moving to the one-offs, I'm running 1 Keion Sumiri Saito. Her effects are, you can remove 1 music counter from your field, draw 1 card, then discard 1 card, plus the revival effect. Sumiri is primarily more consistency for the deck, though the discard effect would make her somewhat splashable in decks that thrive on that. Next is 1 Keion Jun Suzuki. Her effects are, once per turn, you can remove 1 music counter from your field, send 1 Keion monster from your deck to the graveyard, plus the revival effect. Yep, June is basically an Armageddon Knight on demand. Since the revival effect is shared among the Keions, this is a good way to proc them. It's also best used with Keion Tonchan, a card I'm not running but have tested, and being a tuner means you can dump a specifically leveled Keion to revive and use for useful synchros. Next is one Keion Ui Hirasawa. Her effects are, you can remove one music counter from your field, gain 500 life points for each Keion monster you control, plus the revival effect. While life points gain is not the most game-breaking of effects, it can be helpful if going into time, and since this archetype does summon quite a bit, that is a very chunky bit of life points you can potentially get, and thematically, it just fits Ui's very hospitable and caring nature. Next is one Keion Mio Akiyama. Her effects are, you can remove one music counter from your field. All Keion monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense until the end phase, plus the revival effect. Now it's not really often you'd be battling with the main deck Keions, but the option is there, and having a buff to help them out with that can't hurt, especially if your opponent has something on the field causing problems for you. Next is one Keion Ritsu Tainaka. Her effects are, you can remove one music counter from your field. This card can attack twice during the same battle phase, plus the revival effect. Ritsu's first effect is very rarely gonna come into play. The main reason for running her is to have as many differently named Keions as possible, and being a tuner does give her other uses. I have been throwing around the idea of trying to combine Keions with War Rocks to go for a more attacking focused deck, outdated as that is. I haven't acted on the idea, but if that sounds interesting, let me know. Next is one Keion Megumi Sokebe. Her effects are, you can special summon this card from your hand by revealing one Keion monster in your hand. You can only special summon Keion Megumi Sokebe once per turn this way. You can tribute one Keion monster you control. Special summon one level 4 or lower Keion monster with a different name from your deck. You can only use this effect of Keion Megumi Sokebe once per turn. Megumi sort of serves a similar role that Red Eye's Darkness Metal Dragon does to Dragon decks, but in a slightly different way. If you have a Keion that is perhaps being negated by something, or has already used its effect, then she can swap it out for another one. Or perhaps you only have Megumi and a copy of Now in your hand. You can special summon Megumi, normal summon Now, then tribute Now off for something more immediately helpful. So she adds a bit of, I think versatility is the word. For the final Keion, I'm running one Keion Sawako Yamanaka. Her effects are, if you control 2 or more face-up Keion monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon Keion Sawako Yamanaka once per turn this way. You can remove 2 music counters from your field, special summon 2 Keion monsters, one from your hand and one from your deck, in defense position, but they cannot attack and their effects are negated. You can only use this effect of Keion Sawako Yamanaka once per turn. Keion monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. Sawako is a more beefed up Keion. She can also get Keions from the main deck, like Megumi, but she requires 2 music counters and summons 2 Keions. They can't really do anything on the field, but this is purely for extra deck summoning. She also gives some protection, which is pretty important for an archetype to have. To round out the monsters, I'm running 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. This hand trap requires no introduction, but for any newer players that aren't familiar with it, Ash Blossom can be discarded from your hand if a card or effect would either add a card from deck to hand, including drawing, special summon a monster from the deck, or send a card from the deck to the graveyard. She is pretty much the queen of hand traps. There are very few decks seen that don't run her. Moving on to the spells, I'm running 3 Keion Cake. Its effect is, excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, special summon 1 excavated level 4 or lower Keion monster from among them, also shuffle the rest back into the deck. You can only activate 1 Keion Cake per turn. This is another of the really important cards. If you don't have Nodoke in your hand, specifically your opening hand, this can help dig for her. Alternatively, if you do have Nodoke in your hand, Keion Cake can be used as negation bait. Next is 3 Keion Dive. Its effect is, discard 1 Keion monster, draw 2 cards. This serves the same purpose that Trade-In serves for level 8 decks, although if it does get negated, that's not really the end of the world, since getting the Keions with the revival effect into the graveyard can still set you up for plays. Next is 3 Keion Revive. Its effects are special summon 1 Keion monster from your graveyard. During your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 5 of your banished Keion monsters, shuffle them into your deck, then draw 1 card. You can only use this effect of Keion Revive once per turn. While most of the main deck Keions can revive themselves, they get banished if they leave the field again, unless they're detached from Xyz monsters. So this card can help you better choose when to use that effect. Also, since some decks like to banish opponents' monsters, like Kashtira, the second effects can help you get some of them back, provided they aren't banished face down. Next is 3 Keion Roll Call. Its effect is add 1 Keion monster from your deck to your hand. Rota is at 1 and Isolde has now been banned, so we need all the help we can get. You can also technically use this as bait, but I wouldn't really recommend it for this card unless you can afford it. Next is 2 Keion High School. Its effects are, when this card is activated, you can add 1 Keion Clubroom from your deck or graveyard to your hand. You can activate the effects of Keion monsters you control or in your graveyard up to twice per turn. It's not quite an orchestrated babble, letting you use Orcust monster effects as quick effects, but being able to double up on Keion monster effects I feel is still pretty good. June can dump 2 Keions, Mio can buff Keions by 1,000 points, Mugen can pop 2 monsters, Aussa can summon 2 tokens, etc. I think 2 is a good ratio since it can grab Clubroom from the graveyard as well, and one of the extra deck cards can get it as well, so I think it's fine. Next is 1 Keion Clubroom. Its effects are, each time a Keion monster or monsters is normal or special summoned, place 2 music counters on this card, maximum 6. Once per turn, you can remove 2 music counters from this card. Reveal 3 Keion spell or trap cards from your deck. Your opponent chooses 1 for you to add to your hand, and you shuffle the rest back into your deck. Keion monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. The 3 important cards of the deck I feel are Nautica, High School, and this. Most of the Keions do need music counters to use their effects, and this card is how they do it. I did originally not have a limit for the counters, but I felt making another Gateway of the Six scenario might be too much, even though that card is better in a lot of ways. With the second effect, you're going to show multiple copies of the same card 99% of the time. Otherwise, you can still show the 3 most useful, and your opponent will have to think what benefits you the least. For the final 2 spells, I'm running 1 Call by the Grave for hand traps and graveyard disruption, and 1 Reinforcement of the Army to supplement Roll Call. I would also run cards like Monster Reborn, Harpy's Feather Duster, and Triple Tactics talents, but deck space is pretty tight, and most people would advise against going above 45 cards at most. For the traps, I'm running 3 Keion Concert. Its effect is, when a spell or trap card or monster effect is activated while you control 2 or more Keion monsters with different names, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Pretty simple negate. Doesn't negate everything, but it's searchable and does the job. For the last 3 cards, I'm running 3 Keion Twin Characters. Its effect is, tribute 1 Keion monster, shuffle 2 cards your opponent controls into the deck. Having some form of disruption is kinda necessary, and given the amount of protection a lot of cards have, non-targeting, non-destruction removal is really how you have to do things. Moving to the extra deck, I'm running a mix of card types. For the fusions, I'm running 2 Death Devil Norimi Kawaguchi. Her effects are, requires 3 Keion monsters with different names, must first be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards you control. You do not use polymerization. Cannot be used as fusion material. Once per turn, quick effect, you can send 1 Keion card from your hand or face up from your field to the graveyard. Negates 1 card your opponent controls. Your opponents cannot activate monster effects in response to this effect's activation. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effects, you can special summon Keion monsters from your deck whose total levels are less than or equal to this card's level, but they cannot attack and their effects are negated. That's a lot. I chose Contact Fusion since there's no way for me to make a Keion-themed fusion card. She can't be used for fusions, so no need to worry about Super Poly. She can non-target negate opponent's cards, though you have to have something in your hand or on your field to activate it, and I'm only blocking responding from monster effects. Having spell speed 4 would be too powerful, I think. And she floats, though only through destruction, which can be played around, but if you destroy her yourself, you won't need to worry about that. Next is 2 Death Devil Sawako Yamanaka. Her effects are, requires 1 Keion tuner plus 2 or more non-tuner monsters. Must first be synchro summoned. Cannot be destroyed or targeted by your opponent's card effects. Once per turn, during either player's turn, when a card or effect is activated, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon Keion monsters from your graveyard whose total levels are less than or equal to this card's level. I went back and forth with the summoning condition since I was basing it on Majestic Star Dragons. She has Chaos Max Dragon's protection, Quasar's Omni Negate, and floats like Norimi, but I made this card before since it summons from the graveyard but applies no restrictions. Next is 1 Baronne de Fleur. I do know that the majority of people will know this card and most of the other cards in this extra deck, but I'll still go over them for any newcomers. Its effects are, requires 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters, or as some say, requires generic materials. Once per turn, you can target 1 card on the field, destroy it. Once while face up on the field, when a card or effect is activated, quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. You can only use the previous effects of Baronne de Fleur once per turn. Once per turn, during the standby phase, you can target 1 level 9 or lower monster in your graveyard. Return this card to the extra deck, and if you do, special summon that monster. This is a staple for any deck that uses tuners and synchros. Even if a deck isn't focused around synchro summoning, some of them will try to include this. I don't think the third effect comes up all that often, but it's there if you decide to use it. For the Xyz, I'm running 1 Levier the Sea Dragon. Its effect is, requires 2 level 3 monsters. Once per turn, you can detach 1 material from this card, then targets 1 banished level 4 or lower monster, special summon that targets to your field. Since this archetype does a lot of banishing, you do need ways to get your cards back. There is also the dual purpose of stealing your opponent's banished monsters. I'm not running too many level 3s in this deck, but this can still be made. Next is 1 Daigusto Emerald. Its effects are, requires 2 level 4 monsters. Once per turn, you can detach 1 material from this card, then activate one of these effects. Target 3 monsters in your graveyard, shuffle all 3 into the deck, then draw 1 card. Or, targets 1 non-effect monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. That second effect in this particular deck is never coming up. You are solely using the first effect, and having relatively easy recycling helps a lot. If you haven't banished a lot of Keions, then this gets them back for future turns. Next is 1 Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder. Its effects are, requires 2 level 12 monsters, irrelevant since it never gets summoned that way. Once per turn, if an Xyz monster battled this turn, you can also Xyz summon Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder by using 1 Xyz monster you control as material. Transfer its materials to this card. Quick effect, you can detach 2 materials from this card. Send all other cards from the field to the graveyard. Once per turn, if another card or cards you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can attach 1 card from your hand, deck, or extra deck to this card as material. This is one of the Xyz bombs. You drop this and your opponent has no way of dealing with it, you pretty much win the game. And even if your opponent tries to stop it, you can use it multiple times if it has enough materials. I've used it quite a bit in Master Duel, and it's always satisfying wiping the field unopposed. Finally, for the links, I'm running 2 Keion Bust. Its effects are, requires 2 level 4 or lower Keion monsters. If this card is link summoned, you can activate 1 Keion High School from your deck. Keion cards you control cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects. You can banish this card from your graveyard, target 3 Keion spell or trap cards in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, then draw 1 card. You can only use this effect of Keion Bust once per turn. Links are nowhere near as important anymore since Master Rule 4 passed, and some archetypes don't have any links, but I wanted to at least try making one. This one activates the field spell immediately, more or less reducing the need to run terraforming. It gets back any back row you might need, and if you combine this with Clubroom and base Sawako, your opponent has to use non-targeting, non-destruction removal to clear your field. It's not complete immunity, but if the Warthopper lock is anything to go by, it could get annoying. For the more generic links, I'm running one IP Masquerena. Its effect requires 2 non-link monsters. During your opponent's main phase, you can quick effect, immediately after this effect resolves, link summon 1 link monster using materials you control, including this card. You can only use this effect of IP Masquerena once per turn. A link monster that used this card as material cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. This is a link staple, and if it's used correctly, it can really be a thorn in your opponent's side. Next is one Nightmare Unicorn. Its effect requires 2+ monsters with different names. If this card is link summoned, you can discard 1 card, then target 1 card on the field, shuffle it into the deck. Then, if this card was co-linked when this effect was activated, you can draw 1 card. You can only use this effect of Nightmare Unicorn once per turn. While any co-linked Nightmare monsters are on the field, for your normal draw in your draw phase, draw 1 card for each different card name among those co-linked Nightmare monsters, instead of drawing just 1 card. Of the link Nightmares, this and Phoenix are the most used. This is also a great target to use Masquerena for. Next is one Mekk-Knight Crusadia Evermax. Its effects requires 2+ monsters special summoned from the extra deck. While this link summoned card is on the field, your opponents cannot target this card with card effects. Also, their monsters cannot target monsters for attacks, except this one. Once per battle, during damage calculation, if this card battles a special summoned monster, quick effect, you can make this card gain attack equal to that opponent's monster's attack during that damage calculation only. If this link summoned card you control is sent to your graveyard by an opponent's card, you can shuffle 1 card on the field into the deck. This is one of the best link 4s available, and arguably the best Masquerena target. If summoned with her effect, your opponents can't target it with card effects, it can't be destroyed by card effects, your opponents can only attack it gets stronger when battling, and even when they get rid of it, provided it was sent to your graveyard, you non-target spin a card. It's almost the whole package. Next is one access code talker. Its effects requires 2+ effect monsters. Your opponents cannot activate cards or effects in response to this card's effect activations. If this card is link summoned, you can target 1 link monster that was used as material for its link summon. This card gains attack equal to that monster's link rating times 1000. You can banish 1 link monster from your field or graveyard. Destroy 1 card your opponent controls. Also, for the rest of this turn, you cannot banish monsters with that same attributes to activate this effect of Access Code Talker. This is a game ender. Even if you target a Link 2, that's 4300 points of damage direct. If you use Update Jammer, which lets whatever it summons attack twice, that's lethal. Unless something has destruction protection, little to nothing will stop this bad boy going off. And the last card is one Saryuja Skuldread. Its effects requires 2+ monsters with different names. This card gains effects based on the number of monsters used for its link summon. 2 or more, if a monster or monsters is normal or special summoned to a zone this card points to, that monster or monsters gains 300 attack and defense. 3 or more, once per turn during your main phase, you can special summon 1 monster from your hand. 4. When this card is link summoned, you can draw 4 cards, then place 3 cards from your hand on the bottom of the deck in any order. This is a pretty high investment card, but if you can get it to go off with full materials, the payoff is more than worth it. And that's it for the deck profile. I've kept the deck pretty much pure, as I'm not entirely sure what other cards I could put in without having too many. It doesn't brick really, but as basically everyone will say, the more cards you add, the more cards you have to draw to get the ones you need. If any of you have any suggestions on what further improvements I could make, please let me know down below. Again, if you'd like to see test hands, also let me know. And I hope you enjoyed this. As always, please rate, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on X, consider backing me on Patreon, and remember to stay chilled.